Hi, this is Chris Vody, and I am doing a Squeaky Chair interview once again, the last one for 2014, and more than likely the last one for quite some time. I am joined here today with Brian Martinez. Now, Brian Martinez is a comic book artist. Now, unlike the other comic book artists I've done, he's a little bit more on the independent side. He hasn't actually published anything, but he does have an ongoing series on his website. So it's basically like a webcomic, but he'll explain more about that. Um, Now, I've actually talked to Brian a couple of times, and I met him when I came across his comic, and I thought it was a very good design. It had really great art. It had a really good storyline, and it was something I immediately connected to. And then I emailed Brian, and we just kind of exchanged back and forth talking about his comic. So I'm here today with Brian. You there, Brian?
Yes. Yes, I am. Am I coming in pretty clear?
Loud and clear, yes.
Okay, great.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm on my little break and looking forward to the new year.
All right, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself, just to get things started?
Sure. My name is Brian Martinez. I live in the Midwest. Grew up here in Chicago. I've always been interested in doing comics and art of that nature, and I've always just been, trying to find a way to sort of get that out there. I'm currently a student at a art college. This is my second time around doing that. I also work a job, and I manage the comic on the side. So I'm a pretty busy guy, with a lot going on. So, and that's basically it.
Okay, so just to let you know, we have about 8 hours to do this, so, if you could talk fast so we don't go over those 8 hours, that'd be great. I make that joke every time. I'm sure my viewers are getting annoyed with me on that one. So before we get started with your comic, I want to ask you a couple of background questions first.
Okay.
Now, you said you're in the Chicago area, is that correct?
That is correct.
Have you been there all your life?
Yes, I was born and raised here. I actually live currently about 3 blocks from the hospital I was delivered in.
Oh, that's something to brag about.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't always been here. I've been in different parts of the city, but this is just sort of like where I'm resident now. So, but yeah, I've always lived in Chicago. My last name implies that I'm Latino in my background. I'm actually, my parents are from Puerto Rico. I'm the first generation in my family born here in the city.
No, I didn't once suspect that the name Martinez meant anything other than American. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I thought I would clear it up because I know it's
Okay.
Ukrainian.
So you're a sexy Puerto Rican then. Gotcha.
That is right.
All right. So now, was making comic books something that you were always fascinated in from a young age, or did you have other career aspirations?
I always wanted to do art. That was something that I guess I just always had an attraction to. It could be because I spent a lot of time in front of the TV watching cartoons, and because my parents were both working, and I would stay with caretakers and stuff, and so I'd spend a lot of time watching television cartoons, and then I would try to copy those. I would also, I remember when I really got into comics was one day. It's a short story. My mother was she went to a place. She used to work for a chiropractor, and she would buy supplies at this medical supply place for her job. And one day she went there, and I guess they had these discount comics that had the covers ripped off that were from the 1970s, and you could buy like a package of 10 for like $1. And so she would buy the entire package and bring it to me. And then they weren't connected. They were just random. You might get a Star Wars comic and then a Micronauts comic and like a Spider-Man or whatever. and you wouldn't know what the beginning, like what would happen before or what was going to happen after. But she would bring it to me, and I would read them over and over and just look at the artwork and look at how they handled it, and I was so enthralled. I wanted to reproduce that. So that was really where my passion came from. It was what I saw on television, what I read, and I never let go of that. I mean, you know, there were many times where I thought, I don't know if comics is lucrative enough, a business that I could like live off of. And I had debated going into graphic design or doing advertising, things like that. But I think that now I'm at the point where I don't care if it makes me rich or not. I just want to do something that I love doing. This is something that I think many people will do if they do like a real, like a job, in retail or something for a while, and then they grow to hate it. And they might say, well, I think I'd rather be doing something I love and like not be rich than do something I hate. So and then that's basically, yeah, that's always been a passion of mine. I like telling stories with pictures.
Okay, so I want to let all the viewers know, and you, Brian, um, you're going to notice some static from my microphone. I'm sent in for a replacement, but it didn't come in time for this interview, so I apologize for all the static. So you just kind of have to bear with it. I'll keep muting my mic when Brian's talking, so not to distract from that. All right. So you mentioned that you're going to college right now for art. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. So I I originally went to college in the 90s. So yeah, I just gave away my age in a way. I originally went to college in the mid 90s. And at the American Academy of Art, which is a very prestigious art school in Chicago, where a lot of very famous comic artists and even illustrators from the 20th century had attended. And I learned a good deal, but I ran out of money and couldn't finish. So I had to work jobs to pay off my loans, and I did that for several years because I was also trying to pay a mortgage, or not a mortgage, a rent, and survive while at the same time paying these bills off. And so my last job, where I worked at an art supply store, the art supply store was getting closed down, and I needed to do something with myself. So I decided I had just paid all my bills off. I'm going to go back to art school. So I applied at the Illinois Institute of Art, which is actually, appropriately, it's part of a larger conglomerate of art schools across the country called the Art Institutes. I've been going there. I'm about to graduate. I'm less than a year away from being finished. And in my time there, I basically made it my goal to basically ace every class and to make every project into something that is portfolio worthy. And it's, treating it very differently from when I first went through. I even manage a Society of Illustrators club at the school, which is yet another thing that keeps me really busy, where I try to organize events with the other illustrators, and we do funding. We make greeting cards and calendars, and we tutor each other and stuff like that. And I've made good friends with my professors, some connections. So yeah, the Illinois Institute of Art has been a really good change for me, and that's where I've been. And so that's what I've been doing with the school stuff.
Wow, that's quite impressive what you're doing there. Sorry, right now I'm trying to show my shirt off to people. I just got it in the mail like 10 minutes ago. So if any of you math whizzes out there can figure out this formula, let me know.
Uh-huh.
So, all right, so you sound like you're very busy with college, and that's good. Really got to take the opportunity to make every, especially with something like graphic design and art school, make everything you do count for your future. What are your plans when you graduate? Do you want to go into a specific career field, or are you just kind of open?
All right. So, I'm okay. So let me I got to make a statement about going to art school. It's a common joke that goes around where people who go for art degrees will likely never really realize the potential that art degree grants them. So people will make a joke saying that an art degree is a waste of time. And I would argue that that there is some truth to that, because there are a lot of people who go to art school saying, "Oh, well, I like to draw, so but and those people, they don't tend to take it very seriously, and they end up not really realizing their potential, which sort of falls in line with this trope. But I think that if you take it very seriously, you try to educate yourself outside of art school. So I have to like live and breathe and eat and drink art, and then eventually I shit it out, and that's basically what you get on my website. But I believe in doing that, and also I have an entrepreneurial approach where instead of getting out and trying to find a job working for a company, I want to be the company. And I think that that's another thing, is that you create value and then people will come, and that's sort of my approach. So when I get out of here, I have a few goals. One is I want to create a network or a society of illustrators outside of school, specifically in the Midwest area, because in the Illustrator Society is a big thing on the East Coast and on the West Coast, but there really isn't anything in the Midwest. At least nothing really solid. So I feel like there's a lot of potential for growth in that department. I also am very big on collaboration and teamwork. So most of the time, independent comic guys like myself end up having to do everything on their own. They have to write it, they have to illustrate it, they have to color it, print it, and then go out there and hustle and sell it. And I think that it would be more successful if I found other people who were also trying to get that done and network with them and work with them and sort of like create some kind of comic artist conglomerate, entity is basically what I want to do, of independent people that want to all succeed in their own way, and we basically all help each other. And it's sort of creating a culture of that. And that is one of my more ambitious goals. The other is to basically take my current webcomic, Good Guy, and just take it as far as I can, and also add to it other titles that I want to create and connect them all to the Good Guy name. Basically, I want to make that into a brand, and not just something that I not only am passionate about and love doing, but something that I want to, I want other people to recognize as much as they do any other iconic piece of visual art or or comic. So that's basically what I want to do. Those are my goals when I get out of school.
Well, that is a very good approach that you're doing. I wish it's something I would have done when I was in school. Not quite as old as Brian here, but I did go to school quite some time ago. Now, and I actually understand a lot about what you're talking about, trying to, you get a group of people together, and when I was doing game design a few years back with a business partner, we always had each other, but it wasn't really enough to get anything done, so we tried to bring people in, and we tried to, like assign them roles, and what we discovered is that everybody wants to do game design, but no one wants to do the work that's involved. They really just want to be like the ideas guy. It's like, oh, we should have elves in our game. It's a football game.
Right.
It's like they don't want to do any of the work that is involved, even in just idea creation. I mean, it's not just coming up with ideas and getting $1 million for it. I mean, everything is a lot of work. So we'd often have people kind of flake out and do their own thing, and it's like, okay, well, thank you for wasting our time. I mean, so I definitely understand where you're coming from with that and what you're wanting to do there. So I think it's good that you're doing that.
Well, thank you.
Just to let our viewers know, if you want to ask Brian any questions, go ahead and do so. And if a good question comes up, I'll let Brian know. Whether or not he answers them is up to him, but, I'll at least ask him.
I'm an open book.
All right, so let's go ahead and go into your writing a little bit. Do you mind if I show the viewers a an image of your comic?
No, not at all. Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and activate screen share. Just give me 1 second. And while I do that, how about you tell us a little bit about Good Guy Comic?
Okay. So, like most kids, when I was learning comics, I wanted to do, the typical stuff. I wanted to do superheroes. I wanted to do fantasy. I wanted to do action, adventure. I still do. I still have that craving. But when I was going into art school and while I was working in an art supply store, I talked to people in the business. I had looked to see what was trending. And I started to think I wanted to make something kind of new. I think it's been done before. It probably has at some point. But I wanted to do something new to me that was a sort of a fresh idea from my perspective that I had never tried, and also something that was very personal. So, Good Guy is a comic that is basically an autobiographical story about my romantic experiences. And the point of it is there's a few layers to it. One is I want to discuss relationships from my perspective and how I evolved and changed from what my sort of like ideas and inspiration, or not inspirations, expectations about romance with the fair sex was when I was younger, and because it begins with me as a high school student, and then how I changed over time with my experiences growing into adulthood and all of the various stories I had, some of which were very crazy in terms of my experiences, but also the sort of like it's something cathartic, it's something that I can always look at and remember, because as we get older, we might forget these parts of ourselves, and so I want to have something for myself to look at, remember my teenage years and my young adult life, etc. But also because, to sort of say, I think that the thing that makes my goal with Good Guy was to make the main character me, but something that anyone else can relate to, because I don't feel that I'm somehow unique or, like in such a way that no one can understand or my story. And so I still presented it as sort of like, this is almost what most, young teenage people go through with regards to love and relationships. And I wanted to be as honest about it as possible. So this is not a story that puts me in the role of hero or victim or anything like that, but rather just to say, well, these are the kinds of experiences I had, and these are the kinds of people that I, used to date and hang out with, and that affected me and shaped me into the person that I am, and this is sort of the reality of that. And that is really, at its core, that's what Good Guy is about. Now, I wanted to be fun with it, so I also have a lot of humor. I have a lot of nerd references, because I myself, as an artist, have always had a vivid imagination, and I've always tried to perceive my world as something more interesting than it was, so that I can better deal with it. It's sort of like an attempt to take control, you could say. I do that a lot in the book, so there will be points where the imagery will alter itself to suit whatever I might have been thinking at the time. And additionally, it's also therapeutic, and I make it literally therapeutic, where the main character, who I've named Guy, by the way, instead of naming it after myself, walks into a cafe and starts talking to the reader about his experiences. And basically, it's like he's talking to a therapist, and you, the reader, are the therapist. Now, of course, all you can do is listen, but that's usually what they do. But to make it, one of the things I want to start is a conversation about that, relationships in a frank way, with I think a focus on empathy and understanding of everyone involved. But have some fun while I'm at it. So I mean, that's the basics of Good Guy.
Okay, so I'm just showing people some of the pages of the comic. There's a specific page I want to get to. Um, Yeah, we can stop there. Who doesn't like looking at hot, attractive women? And they're all above 21, so everyone shut up. So,
Yeah,
anyways, I, I have to say that your art design is really good. Um, I really love, especially these first few. They were all in black and white, and the ones that I'm getting to will be in color. But you're actually very good at kind of, well, I'm not really an art kind of person, so to me it's like you draw a straight line and I'm like, ooh, cool. I'm
hmm
more of like read a book and then I get excited. But the art is very good. I think that this is something I would really love to see in a comic book. Do you have any plans of taking it to that level, or do you just want to leave it online?
Oh, I absolutely want to print it. I actually have some prints of the first issue, which is the one we're looking at right now, uh, that I had made, but they're very pricey. So I got to find another way to do it because I can't sell them, without it being like ridiculously overpriced for what it is. But I do want to make prints. I have some people that I'm talking to with, about that, trying to find the best rate. I'd like a return to comics that were less expensive and maybe weren't printed on like the highest quality stuff, but they were easier to get your hands on. Because again, I might be thinking about back in the day, comics were like 75 cents around my time and maybe $1. And now they're close to $5 a piece, but they're printed on much nicer paper and with the intention of like them lasting a long time. I'm not that concerned. I'd rather they were like more accessible. So, but yes, I do very much want to get the Good Guy printed. Maybe even a collection like a novel. Because one of the things I have to say, I don't mean to filibuster here, but and I'm not. I just want to make this point. One thing about Good Guy that I think is also really cool to me is that every volume or story arc revolves around Guy's interaction with one girl, like basically how he meets her and usually grows fond or maybe even falls in love with her, and then sort of where it goes from there. And once that ends, that arc, then that is one volume, and then he meets the next girl, and then it goes into that story. And they will all have like a different tone because the character has gotten older and he's had the experiences from the past, which some of them are sort of like they haunt him. I think to some degree. I mean, who isn't haunted by their past relationships on some level? And so like the story matures because it is a mature story. I mean, there's language and there will be nudity at some point when it's time for that, and stuff like that. So this is like really honest. I'm really burying myself here, so that's sort of the point. But yeah, I want to do issues, and I'd like to do volumes with just the story, with just that individual, romantic interest.
Now, when I look at this, what I'm often thinking of, um, based on what you've just described and just reading through it, it feels like I'm reading a mature Archie comic. And I
Yeah.
don't know if you find that insulting or complimentary, but that's the way I feel like, except that it's more focused on telling an actual story rather than just telling a series of situations. And I'm wondering, did you find any inspiration from Archie comics, or were there any other comics that gave you a sort of inspiration for doing this comic?
Well, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. I actually used to read a lot of Archie comics, so I mean, it's not really a surprise that Good Guy has an Archie comics feel. I was a big fan of them because that was another thing that my mother, from she would occasionally when I was young, she would go to the grocery store, the supermarket, and in the impulse section there were Archie comics, and I would ask her to get me one, and she would. And then I would take those home, and I would also try to emulate the artwork from the Archie comics, as well as manga that I got into later, and the superhero comics. It's just the influences from all over. And yeah, I mean, Archie comics are like these little slice of life things that usually aren't that funny, and they just sort of like they're just little things that you turn your brain off and you read. With Good Guy, I could see the inspiration of that, but I definitely have like a much more not only mature but a longer lasting. Like I want to leave a longer lasting impression. But yeah, it's funny that you should mention that because I was totally inspired by Good Guy. I mean, Archie.
Okay, so the one thing that really stood out with your story stood out for me was you're telling basically your perspective, but also a guy's perspective when it comes to love. And the thing that you did, the pitfall that you really avoided, which was very good that you did, in my opinion, is you didn't make this story about how you were a victim and the whole world was against you, and every person around you, all the guys were just trying to steal your thunder, and all the girls were just really mean and full of themselves. And while you do have a few characters that kind of touch into that area a little bit, most of your characters seem to be very realistic. They seem to be just the kind of people you expect to meet within a given environment. Especially the women in your comic, you don't really throw women under the bus. You say, you know what, these are people that have their own things going on, and just because I'm the hero of the comic doesn't mean that they have to be nice to me, but at the same time, that doesn't mean they have to be mean to me, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I was curious, how did you develop these female characters and other background characters off of real people, or is it just part of your creation process that you just created people and kind of got inspiration from other characters that you've seen?
Every character in Good Guy is based on a real person that I knew. So they are the real people. However, because I wasn't around those people all the time, I had to some degree, fill in the holes of their life with stuff that I may have learned later. As that sort of like that I use. So I'm to stay still as honest as possible. That's sort of like my main goal with Good Guy, with regards to how I treat the characters, is to be as honest as possible about who they were, because I think that there were definitely times where when the heartbreak stuff happens, like when these relationships take off in the book, in the story, and they go through whatever the hardship is, there will definitely be some stories where I am, or not, I don't want to say me, I'm going to say Guy, where Guy gets his heart broken, right? And because the girl that he was in love with, sometimes it'll be because she'd done him wrong, because she was being selfish, or whatever at the time, or maybe because she wasn't prepared for that kind of relationship. It could be, but the point is to be as honest about those reasons as possible, because I'm not interested in demonizing a side or even taking a side. I'm all about just saying this is how it happened, and from Guy's perspective during the event, this is how he reacts. But we also will fast forward to Guy, the older guy in the cafe, when he reflects on what happened and basically says, now that this is past, this is what I feel about this situation. And he will talk as openly about it and as honestly about it as I would if someone were talking to me about these experiences. So it's not about making heroes and villains per se, because there are times where Guy makes selfish choices, and they'll be sometimes out of bitterness, or because he's feeling petty, because or maybe he's being feeling as though he's going to be betrayed, and so he takes the initiative and decides to strike first, like, hurt them before they hurt me, kind of a deal. And yeah, I mean, those things have happened. And so this is an honest conversation about relationships, but also to sort of like shake away this sort of trope or idea that, um, this sort of like idea that men in relationships they don't like invest as much, or that they're not prepared to sacrifice as much. And I think that that's something that we don't often discuss, like openly. So that's why I think it's, for me, it's important to tell from my perspective as honestly as possible.
And it's quite interesting. I love this image that you have here, where we're talking about the goblins that represent your fear and insecurity. We've got lust, neediness, anxiety, self-esteem, and frustration. And that's it. It's really interesting how you can take yourself and really break yourself down and say, well, these were the things that I was feeling, because a lot of people are not able to be honest about themselves. So when designing Guy, the character who was based off of you, um, did it? How long did it really take for you to become this comfortable with examining yourself? Was this something that you were always able to do, or you do find that within the last few years you're really able to say, you know what? Sometimes I was a jerk. Other times, I was just really insecure. At what point were you able to really develop Guy as a character by addressing your own fears and insecurities?
Probably in the last few years. I mean, when I finally decided to sit down and make the comic, I started to really pursue self-knowledge, and the with regards to, for example, the Socratic method, Socrates, know thyself, and I started to basically ask myself without going into self-pity, where it's like, oh, I have so many bad traits. It's not about that. It was just about saying, okay, so what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And can I be honest about those things? And have any of those things changed? Because when I was, at the time of this book, when I was like 15 years old, which is when this takes place, I had a lot of insecurities, and I had no experience, and I was surrounded by people that all of my friends seemed as though they were far more ethereal and intelligent and wise, even though they were my age. And it never occurred to me that they were probably just as uncomfortable and just as insecure as I was. And so I always felt like I was the person in the worst social shape, and I had a lot of problems with that. And so it's much easier for me to look back on myself then and say, wow, I was a wreck. But I don't think that that's really unusual or, I don't know, like extra odd for someone of that age. I think that when you're in high school and you're going through those teenage years, this is very common. So for me to be able to put it out there wasn't very difficult. I'm very comfortable in my skin now, so I can very easily talk about what my flaws are and which ones I'm trying to overcome, and which ones I've made peace with.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the story. Now, you so far have about 2 issues out. Um, what is the overall story that we find in issue 1 and issue 2?
Okay, well, issue 1 and issue 2. So this is the Diane arc, is what I'm calling it. I'm calling it that because this is about Guy. He goes to high school when he starts, right? And he starts to make friends there, and he's got all kinds of social issues where, he's very shy. He doesn't like to get up in front of groups of people. He's very much an introvert. And he meets this girl, Diane, and Diane is someone who makes him feel really comfortable. and she's just really a natural at it, you know. And she's also one of the reasons why is because, and I haven't explored this much in the book yet, but I will. Diane also has issues, and she's also got her own, you know, anxiety and stuff, and other problems that we will explore as the book moves on. So he meets her through mutual friends, and he starts to have like first experiences through, you know, some friends from school, and then there's a really old friend that says, "Hey, I want you to come out with me." What's about to happen currently is that they go to this mall, and they're going to meet with some other girls there, and Guy is going to basically take a large step forward socially and romantically, even though not with Diane, because at this point he likes her and he has feelings for her, but he doesn't think it's going to go anywhere, so he doesn't really, move forward on that end, and instead feels comfortable just being her friend and, like, you know, being around her. So in the absence of that, he's sort of like having other experiences on the side, and everything is going to push him closer to Diane, and Diane will be pushed closer to him, and then, well, I'm not going to give anything else away, but you'll see what happens from there. But that's basically what it is. This is the Diane arc. This is really awkward. This is really, you know, early teenage love. Maybe it's just lust. We can go into that too. It's definitely a bit of both. And yeah, I mean, it's very much like puppy love in high school. So.
Yeah, stop.
Did I answer that question okay?
Oh, no, that was a wonderful. I think it's an interesting that you have that story arc, because when you first start reading the first comic, which of course is in more of a black and white, and then the second issue gets more into color, the first one seems like an incomplete story. But then it's like you realize when you go into the second one, it's just a continuation of the first. So my question for you with that is, why not continue it as one story until you can have more of an ending, even if it's an arc? Or was there a specific reason why you stopped the comic there? And what's that pattern going to be when you stop the comic to go to the next issue?
All right, so because I guess the way that I read comics, I was big on the way that they used to be written, where one issue would not be a contained story, but rather part of over, you know, a longer arc. The Diane story will take a while to tell, and because there's a lot that happens, and there are definitely a lot of twists and turns throughout that, because and there's also other characters that I introduced in the first book that will start to take a much larger role, and as well as in the second one, that also sort of shape Guy's future. So I want to tell it in a series of cliffhangers, is how I would put it. So the first book ends on the cliffhanger of them telling Guy's friends are saying that they're going to take these girls they met up with and went to the history museum with to the homecoming, and that they were going to make him go with them. Now, of course, they're saying that because they want him to be more, you know, come out of his shell and like be more social, because they think he's a great person, and that he has some value and something to bring, but that, you know, he needs that nudge, and so they want to do that. But of course, Guy's not prepared for this, so this sort of freaks him out. So you have like it's sort of a cliffhanger in an emotional way. Then the second issue picks up where, you know, the relationship or friendship between Guy and Diane is sort of growing, and he's talking about, oh, you know, I really like her. I mean, she's really cool, and she's like the only girl I feel like I can talk to and be myself around, and she encourages that, and that sort of develops. But then there will be another cliffhanger moment at the end of this issue, that will be basically a very important experience that Guy has, that for multiple reasons, and then it will go from there. So basically there will be, I don't know how many issues it's going to take to tell the Diane story, to be honest, but it probably is going to be about 10 or so. And so that's just for that arc. And then there's several other relationships to go from there. So I'm telling it that way. That's the purpose of it.
Okay, so with the dialogue that you have, do you kind of, well, do you set out from the beginning of each issue, okay, this is the story I want to tell, these are what my characters need to do and how they need to say it, or do you do that like page by page of, well, this is what they need to do next, this is what they need to do next? What is your planning process of getting the image and story from your mind onto the page?
Okay. So when you make comics, it's challenging because you have to, and especially when you're doing them alone, because normally in like the larger companies like Marvel and DC, they have a team of writers, they have a team of pencilers, inkers, colorists, and publishers, etc., and they all work together to get from the start to the finish. But when you're working alone, and you have to sort of plan it out. So the way that I do it is I think about the issue, the issue that I'm working on, and I say, okay, by at the beginning of this issue, I want to be here, and by the end, I need to be here. At this point, this much storytelling has to be told, and then I plan out each page on the beginning of the week, with thumbnails and sort of like thinking about what it's going to say and how it's going to be organized and what I want to get to. But every page is also its own piece. So you have to treat each page like it can stand on its own, even if you don't understand the context, but artistically it has to stand on its own. So you have to treat every page like something and yet see the big picture at the same time, all while writing, illustrating, and coloring everything. So it makes it very challenging, but so I plan it out where I say, in the beginning I want this to happen, in the middle I want this to happen, in the end I want this to happen. And then, as I get every page, I just work on each page like its own entity. And still bearing in mind how many pages I have, which I'm going to try and keep it to 20 pages an issue. I might do more, but 20 is pretty good considering most comics are like 24, but they're also full of ads, and mine doesn't have any ads. So 20 pages is a decent length, and I can tell a good amount of story with it without filling it with a bunch of splash pages that sort of like, it becomes filler. I have no splash pages at all, actually, besides the very first page, the very first issue. And I'm happy with that.
Okay, so you're basically saying that you do like this overall planning for your story, but then when you do each page, you're taking that plan and putting it into action, but you're still planning the exact page itself. Has there ever been a time when you're doing that process that the story has, changed for you in a way that you didn't anticipate? Like an event occurred that you didn't plan on happening, but because it did, it somehow made the story better.
There may have been multiple little, like, minor accidents like that, but for the most part, it's all stuff that is so trivial that it doesn't really change the story that much. It might, at most, change the order in which things happened, but they still really happened, and they were so close that it's kind of irrelevant. Like, there's a point in the second issue where Diane comes home, and she has a little exchange with her mother and her sister, and then goes up to her room, and then spends a little time alone in her room. And that didn't have to happen then. It could have happened at any time, but I really wanted to get that out and make that known, at least on some level, because it's important to her later. So I, at the last minute, actually decided that I wanted to put the focus on Diane for a while and get to know her, because what I didn't want to do is make Diane into sort of cardboard stand-up of a girl. We needed to get to know who she was. And I'm sorry, somebody's trying to Skype me. Sorry about that. So, we needed to get to know her as a whole person because there's other parts of her personality that I wanted to explore. So I decided to move that up a bit, but that's just an example. But it doesn't. I like what happened, so I guess that would be an example. But it really, it's minor. So I mean, but overall, not really. No.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, when it comes to writing, everyone has their own style. So, me, when I write, I don't know what's going to happen any more than where I'm going in the next chapter. So oftentimes I get a really great scene that I didn't anticipate from the beginning, and I'm like, oh, this is really, really good. So, where are you? So, me, I just lost my train of thought. With your comic, are you still going to just try to maintain doing it on the website, or do you have any plans at this time to try to push more for releasing it? And let me follow that question up with saying, um, even if you were to release this in comic book form, would it be based on the comics that you've already done? Or would you release new ones specific for print that the website doesn't have?
That's a good question. I definitely would like to do a print version. Again, I'm just exploring the price options. If there was a way for me to get the money and get it done, I would do it in a New York minute. I know, and I've already spoken to local dealers, like comic shops, that have told me they would carry it for me, which would be great. As far as like how I would release it, I want to make a benefit to people who would like to buy the physical copy. So I think that to do that, you would have to provide something extra. So I've debated a few things about it. Well, one is that the visual quality of the printed versions and of the pages as I have them on my computer, they're higher definition. So they're going to be clearer pictures, richer colors. The ones that are on the website, if the color ones are slightly on the paler side, and the black and white, the zipatone or the screen tone shading is not as crisp as it is in the real version. And I think that is one advantage, but it's not quite enough. So I think what I would also do is include additional artwork on the inside covers and maybe even redraw some panels that I was like kind of not super thrilled with to make them a little bit nicer, or even like drop in some color into the black and white. Not all of them, but maybe like a few pages, like some of the more standout ones or something like that. But I definitely want to bring some value to a printed version of it, because people, if they can just go to your website and read it, they're less likely to buy a copy unless you give them some incentive. So that would be my thinking.
I think that's a very good approach to do. That if people are going to buy it, you want to give them something extra that they can't get just from going to your website and seeing it. So, what tools do you use to create the art and then also create the story? And by that, I know that you'll have to use a graphics program to create the artwork and they actually put the words there, but what I'm also wondering is, do you use a separate tool to actually get some of your ideas down, like Notepad or Scrivener, for the overall story?
Okay. So with the first issue, I drew everything by hand on bristleboard paper, and I just did pencil, and then I went on top with inks. And then I scanned those inks, and in Manga Studio, which is a program that I have, I added the word balloons and the screen tone. So that was what I did with the first issue. Well, since I don't have a scanner here, and I decided that I want to I want to strengthen my ability to do digital work, I decided Good Guy would be a good way to get a lot of practice in. So with the second issue, I decided to go all digital, and I do all the artwork in 3 different programs. I actually get the panels put together in Manga Studio. Then I bring that into another program called Paint Tool Sci, where I do all of the line work and the painting. And then I might bring it into Photoshop after that to maybe do some cleanup or some effects if I want to and things like that. And then I bring it back into Manga Studio and put in all the word balloons. And and fortunately for me, all of those programs play nice with each other with the same kinds of file. It's a PSD file. So I do it that way, and I do it at a very high resolution, and then save them and upload them. As far as like planning out the stories and stuff like that, I do that still traditionally. I just have a sketchbook. I just, when it comes to me, I'm at work or I'm in class or even if I'm at home, I'll just plan out a page where I want things to be, with simple little thumbnails. I usually spend, even when I'm not drawing, because I spend a lot of time on the road because I'm going from work to school to home to somewhere else. I spend a lot of time thinking about the book, and I'll actually thumbnail panels out in my head, and then when I settle on something that I think is visually strong, I'll draw it out, in a sketch on paper, and just to sort of like see it, and then I'll bring it, I'll go in digitally and do like the final version. So.
Now, we've talked already about you doing your female characters and that they're being based on actual people and that you're trying to show their strengths and weaknesses much like you do with your male characters. Now, you being male yourself, do you find that there's any sort of challenge to writing female characters about getting in their mind? And how do you go about doing that to try to represent them properly in your story?
All right. Well, normally, because I knew them for some of the more, let's say, simple to understand characteristics about their personality, I simply would write them as I would a male character. So if a girl, has an interest in video games, I'll just have her playing video games, like something like that. But when I really want to get into the female psyche and I'm trying to like get at something that is something that I may not be familiar with, I will talk to females and I will ask them, I'll talk to women or girls and I'll ask them I'll tell them about what I'm trying to achieve, and then I will ask them what their experience with it is, and I'll talk to several to sort of get as many viewpoints as possible. And then I'll just do my best to interpret that because, again, my goal is to make the ladies just as much as the guys in Good Guy, or the guys and the gals is what I call them. The good gals, I want them to be just as deep and enriched and interesting as the good guys are in the book. So, in order to do that, if I can't do it on my own, then I will talk to others that could help me out, and then I'll try to find something to work within the narrative to sort of get there. So far, I haven't really had that much difficulty, save for a few moments where I needed to ask some questions regarding teenage girls and the way that they might, do things that a guy like me never experienced firsthand or saw.
Okay, so I want you to go ahead and think about a character. Now, it doesn't have to be one of your characters. It can be any character in any TV show, anime, movie, book, or it could be one of your characters if they're that strongly on your mind. I want you to think of one character that you really like and tell us why you really like them.
Huh. Well, let me think about that for a second. I guess I'm going to think of one of my characters, um, and I will. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and go with one of my characters, and it's a girl who I have not introduced yet, and I won't for a while. But her name is Undine, and she was one of Guy's girlfriends from much later in the story when he goes into his sort of mid-20s. And one of the things I really like about her is she is she is a girl who has made a lot of really bad decisions in her life, but she is not a bad person. She is a person who is sort of the victim of her own past. And I really like that about her, and that's how I plan to write her, because this is often what a lot of people who have problems in their adult life, that's sort of like what's going on with them. And I hesitate to use the word victim, because when you're an adult, you can make your own choices. But what I mean is, they're sort of like living in the shadow of the past of maybe their parents or their predecessors. So a little bit about Undine. So when Guy meets her, he meets her in a club, and they meet briefly. They sort of like they don't even speak to each other, but they make eye contact, and that passes. And then like a few days later, he goes to his job, and they hire someone new, and it's her. And this legitimately happened. Like, this is not, I'm not making this up. This is really what happened. And they hit it off. They get along in every way, and they become very close. And one of the things that he learns about her is that she had a child in her home of Virginia, a baby, and she left the baby with her mother because she wasn't ready to grow up yet. And so she came to Chicago and lived with a boyfriend. But meanwhile, there's this child somewhere else who she occasionally talks to and sees. And one of the things that we learn as it goes on is, first we think she is sort of a victim of her circumstance, but then as it goes on, we learn that a lot of the choices and a lot of the things that have happened to her are things that she has decided to do. And she has more agency than we are led to believe. And this is really the way it goes. And the relationship between Guy and Undine is extremely complex and dynamic, because there's a lot of sympathy for her, but there's also a lot of anger, and that's the way she is. She's like, and I really like that, because I think that it's one of those things where if I tell her story, and I will, right, people who will read that or watch that or whatever it is, however they take that in, are going to at once sympathize with her and all of the bad choices that she made and continues to make, and also, like, because of the position it put her in, but also simultaneously be probably a little angry with her. And I like that, because it makes her human. Like, she's capable of great deeds, and also, she's also destructive. Like, she's a little bit of both. And where it comes from, which is basically her parents, her mother, and that relationship, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of child abuse in her past, and molestation and things like that, which sort of shaped her. So these are other factors which, you have this cycle of violence that happens between Undine and her parents, and then her and her child, and then all the men she's involved with, and maybe some of them are abusive to her, and maybe she's abusive to them, and it continues. And I think that that is, and this is not, she's not unique. There's a lot of stories like this in Good Guy as we get older that we're going to examine, or I'm going to display. And the being that the goal of Good Guy is not only to get people talking about relationships between men and women and romance, but also to talk about relationships in general, because those things shape romantic relationships in a lot of ways. They have a lot of effect on them. So that's why I like Undine. She's one of my favorite characters.
Listening to you talk about Undyne and several of the other characters that you are, it almost makes it sound like it's a cross between Archie Comics, which I've already mentioned, and Breakfast Club, where every character kind of has their own thing going on. But the difference then between these two types of stories, where everyone kind of gets together and talk, is that we kind of explore these people individually and see their lives as it's happening. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah. I mean, the guy will remain mostly the central character, but every other character on some level will be explored in terms of, again, like how they view, um, sexuality and romance, and do they believe in love? Do they believe in marriage? Where those things come from, where their beliefs come from, whether they're sort of like inherited from their forebears, or if it's something that they have um, decided on their own, and just that I think that is really what it is. It's definitely got that Breakfast Club vibe where you have these people that you think you know them, but you don't. Like you have they present themselves as like stereotypes, but then it turns out that they're who they are runs much deeper than that, and that is exactly one of the core tenets of what good guy is. Like Diane in the story presents herself originally as like probably the nicest girl you would ever meet. Like she's really feminine, and she's bright and energetic, and she's beautiful, but she doesn't think so. She's a little bit on the nerdy side. She wears glasses. But as it goes on, we learn that Diane is more than just this sort of Mary Jane, character, and that she has we haven't gone there yet, but we are going there. She has her own issues that she's going through, and her life at home isn't all like roses and daffodils or whatever you call it. And the same thing goes with many of the other characters. So yeah, it's definitely a fair assessment.
Um, Speaking with Diane, I think we kind of catch a glimpse of that near the beginning of her story, or when we go to her home. That there's definitely a oh, I can't even think of the word. My mind's
Tension?
kind of blown. Yeah, tension between her and her mother. But that kind of seemed like normal teenage angst. But now that you mention that, it's like now I'm starting to look at that interaction in a little bit more detail, and it's like, oh, I wonder if there's going to be more with that going on.
There
Not
will.
that you have to answer, but I'm just speaking out loud. If anyone's curious, I've got a cigar. That's what this is. I'm going to celebrate tonight. My blog has over 14,000 views this year, but this is about Brian, not about me. But just
Okay.
getting ready.
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
And sometimes it's a duck. Whack, whack. I don't know where that came from. Just go with it. All right. So it sounds like you have a very good idea that you're going with. Something that you're just doing for the fun of it. And while you'd like to make a career out of it, you're perfectly happy with it just being on your website for people to see. Now, if it came down to you got a really good job and you had to give up your comic, would that be a decision that you could make, or would you try to find some way to do both your dream job and doing your comic?
Oh
Assuming
no,
that your dream job wasn't your comic.
right. I would definitely make good guy work. I when I made the decision to do the book, I think that the most important thing that I do is finish it. So that is definitely going to happen. I'm not gonna stop. The only way that I might even consider doing that, and this is not likely, is if there was literally no one visiting the website anymore, and that if I took it down, no one would miss it. But even then, like I never really. I mean, I think it's great that people are even looking at it, and I hope that more do, and I hope that we can talk about it and like things like it, our own experiences, and how we can relate to what's happening in the story. I really like that, but I think that Good Guy is personal enough that if no one wanted to do it or like look at it, I would still want to do it, even just for myself, because it's again like I said before, it's therapeutic, and that I don't mean to say that like I'm going through anything. I'm actually quite satisfied in my life right now, but I still really want to tell this story, and I think that it's it's very gratifying to finish a page and put it up there is really gratifying for me. So no, I won't stop.
You mentioned that you do have people coming to your site. What kind of feedback are you getting? I mean, you know how I feel about it, but and I've mentioned it here. But what other things do you hear about your content?
It's mostly positive. A lot of people like the artwork. A lot of people like the story. I got mostly guys. A lot of young guys that I've spoken to have been like, "Oh, I really feel that, what like I relate to what you're saying. I feel like that's real. I feel, like that speaks to me." And I'm amazed. I didn't really think that it would, because it feels like it's too early, because I haven't really gotten as deep as I'm ready to. Like we were just talking about Undyne, and I really want to just jump into that story, but that's so far off right now that I can't. But by that time, you'll see what I'm talking about when I talk about how deep I want to get. But right now, it's I'm starting to get there, but it doesn't. But I've already gotten a lot of positive feedback. A lot of people like the artwork and stuff too, and they're very interested in where it goes. I wouldn't even say it's negative, but the only thing that could be considered a negative comment was one guy who said, everyone feels that their own story is the most interesting story that they can tell, and that my artwork was just average. But I didn't take it personally. In fact, I welcome harsh criticism, and I do feel that some of my pages could be stronger because I know I'm capable of that. But as because I'm juggling so many different things, sometimes I feel as though I end up rushing some pages, even though I think the quality is still, I give it 110% of what I can. But I mean, that's the only negative thing I heard, and I don't even really consider that to be too negative. I think mostly it's been very positive, and everyone really enjoys it, and and it's very satisfying.
Okay, so I think that about does it for our interview today. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention?
Yes, I want to talk about. Can I talk about the title and why I call it what I call it?
Oh, definitely. Go ahead.
Okay, so why do I call it Good Guy? And this is like really important to me, because once I was telling someone this is what I want to call my book, and it was actually an ex-girlfriend who will be in the book later on, but she said, "Well, why are you calling it Good Guy?" And she was implying that, and I did clarify this, so I'm not just assuming anything. She was implying that I was trying to make myself out to be a good guy, and that is sort of in the face of adversity of some kind. So like I'm good and everyone else is not, kind of a thing, and that it sounded a lot like a popular trope that people speak about on the internet called the nice guy. And the nice guy is something where you have like these guys that are like, but I'm a nice guy. How come you don't want to be with a guy like me? Because I'm a nice guy and I would be good to you, but instead you date jerks or whatever. And the nice guy trope is being associated with the title of my book, Good Guy. What I want to address is good guys and nice guys are different, and I'm going to tell you why. A good guy is someone who challenges you, who is good to you. He's kind, but he doesn't he doesn't take any of your shit. He will call you out on it, and he will treat you like a peer, essentially. Good guys don't have to be nice all the time. Nice guys are wearing a mask. And there are nice gals as well. But in the context of what we're speaking about, a nice guy is someone who wears a mask because he really wants to be accepted and he wants to be liked. And so it may come natural for him to behave in a nice way and be very polite and and chivalrous, etc. But it's not genuine because he's sacrificing his identity to satisfy and perhaps gain favor of someone else, usually a romantic interest. That's what a nice guy is. A good guy doesn't do that. A good guy lives for himself. He measures himself by his own merits. He treats everyone the way that he wants to be treated until they treat him otherwise. And he doesn't put up with, people's shit. And I always say, be a good guy. Don't be a nice guy. Be a good guy. And challenge people who tell you that they're the same, because they're not. And that's what good guy is about. So that's where that comes from. Because that's my goal.
And I think that's a very admirable goal, and I think that with being a good guy and a good girl, that sounds weird. Good gal? There we go.
Yeah, good gal.
Good gal. I think that's a good, admirable goal that everyone should try to follow in life, is just to be good, be there for yourself. I mean, definitely be there for other people when you can, but be there for yourself first. Make sure that you're taken care of and that no one's going to really be there for you except for you. So you got to really be there for yourself first, and then when you have something extra, give to other people when you can. And I like what you said, that just because you're a good guy doesn't mean that you're always nice. Sometimes I have found that with some friends, when they have a problem, sometimes they need to hear what they want to hear, and other times they need to hear what the hard truth of the situation. And it's really almost an art of knowing the right thing to tell people at times. And I like to think that I'm a good guy and I try to be there for people, but in the end, I'm there for myself first. It might sound a little selfish of me, but you really have to be there for yourself first. So I hope I'm presenting that correctly.
Yeah, I mean, you basically, a good guy loves himself, not in a narcissistic way, but he has self-respect, and that's what it is. It's self-respect and dignity before anything else. And if other people are worthy, you have to you have to give yourself value. Say, look, I'm worthy of something. If a woman is taking advantage of me, then maybe she doesn't have my best interest, so why should I have her best interest? And that's not, and there's no shame in holding yourself to a standard. And I'd say the same thing to women. I think it goes across the board. You just have to hold yourself to a standard. You have to love yourself in order to do that, and then you will surround yourself with people who are worthy of that, because they will also love themselves and they will have the same expectation.
Okay, and where can people find your comic?
Good Guy Comic can be found at, it's www.goodguycomic.com.
Okay, make sure that is comics, C-O-M-I-C, and not comics with an S at the end.
That's right. Comic singular.
All right, and if people want to communicate with you, say like on Twitter, where can they find you?
My Twitter handle is at Xanamaru. I'm going to spell that for you. It's Z as in zebra, A, N as in Nelly, A, M as in M&M's, A, R, and U as in umbrella. It's at Zanamaru. That's the name comes from a character from another book I want to do in a future time. It's like a feudal Japan mystical setting. It's more fun and adventurous.
All right, so I thank you for coming on today, Brian, and talking to us about your comic. Very excited by it and looking forward to future issues that come out. For anyone who's interested in checking out the comic, go to goodguycomic.com. As I mentioned, this is going to be my last video interview that I do for a long while, probably around 6 or 7 months. That's so many other things to do. But if you're ever interested in doing an interview with me, like really interested, let me know, and I'll probably make an exception depending on the circumstances. Beyond that, I'm going to be relaunching the site again on this following Monday. So for all those who are doing the world building stuff, definitely check out that. I'll be trying to get that finished up. And I wish everyone a happy New Year, especially to you, Brian.
Thank you. You too.
All right, and I'm going to go ahead and end this conversation. So everyone, take care.